Better. Welcome everyone back to Senate Education. We have Julia Richter, JFO, with us. Ms. Richter, thanks for taking the time. We're talking about S-191, an act relating to New American Advancement Grant applications. We have this on our agenda twice today because we're going to hear from Scott Giles also, and we're just trying to understand fiscal impact largely, and I'm just trying to pull out, let me find my copy of the bill. I know I got it here. Here we go. 1.1. Okay, Ms. Richter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Julia Richter with the Joint Fiscal Office. Excuse my voice, I'm a little under the weather, which is why I'm not attending with you in person today. But with respect to S-191, my prepared testimony is pretty short because as the bill is currently drafted, we estimate there's no expected fiscal impact of S-191. And this is really because the bill adjusts the eligibility for the grants, but it doesn't adjust the overall amount of funds available for the grants themselves. So pause there. That's all I was really prepared to say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Please.
Thank you, sir. I know that we're having a VSAC vice president coming in later. But I'm curious about if an agency has leftover money at the end of a year, what happens with that? Does it just roll over into the following year? Or?
So if the agency of education has extra funds at the end of a fiscal year, what usually happens then, Ms. Richter, or VSAC?
Right.
But VSAC is not an arm of it's not an agency. Right.
It's not under the hierarchy of.
We fund VSAC, but I believe they exist as their own nonprofit.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And I would defer to VSAC in terms of what happens with leftover funds at the end of a fiscal year. I'll say that in general within state agencies, so not particular to VSAC, if there's funds that have been appropriated, but for some reason don't go out the door, they may remain in sort of the coffers of that agency if they can be used for the same purpose that they were appropriated for. And then there's some budgetary processes that need to be done in order to ensure that those dollars are being spent as they were appropriated for. If they can't be spent as they were appropriated for, they then are often reverted back to the fund so that they can be appropriated back out. So we see a reversions line, for instance, in the education fund, where dollars have been appropriated to the Agency of Education. The Agency of Education, for whatever reason, didn't spend the exact amount that was appropriated to them. They couldn't use those funds, and then they're reverted back to the Ed Fund in order for the General Assembly to go at it again, so to speak.
Please, Senator Williams.
So one of my constituents came to me last fall and said he was quite upset that any education tax funding that is left over has to be used for education. And evidently there was a surplus, and what, according to him, I don't have any way of proving this, what the agency did is they sent the money back to the municipality. And he was quite upset about that, wondering why it didn't come back to him. So evidently they applied that surplus back to the education fund tax rate in that municipality. Is there do you know anything about that?
I'm not sure exactly what you're speaking about. It's possible that in this instance there was a little bit of conflation happening with respect to the surplus dollars that were used in previous years to buy down education property tax rates. So essentially when property tax rates are set, it's working off a number of forecasts, right? Economic forecasts, what we're projecting for property taxes. So at the end of the fiscal year, it's not going to be $0.000 on the bottom line because no one has a crystal ball. So So those surplus dollars were then used to buy down property tax rates for all property taxpayers across the state. So I'm not exactly sure that the situation you're referencing.
Okay, either of mine.
Yeah, if your constituent wants to send an email outlining their concern, maybe to you, we could always forward to joint fiscal, get an answer. It's another idea. Ms. Buckley, thanks for joining us. We're talking about VSAC right now. We know Scott Giles is going to come see us later. For those of you that don't know, Claire Buckley, she represents VSAC in the building, among other organizations. And one of the questions we have, and it might be something you want to message to Scott before he arrives, or you may have the answer.
Sure.
What do, when the state appropriates funds to VSAC, if there are funds that are left over, if you will, what happens to those funds generally? I mean, just eaten up into the operating budget the following year or that sort of thing?
I will message that.
Right.
I mean, I have a general idea, but I don't wanna misspeak and it might depend on
Yeah, sure.
which program you're talking
Yeah,
about, so
yeah,
I will message that.
great, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And I think Ms. Richter has left us, but oh, there you are. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions for Ms. Richter at this point. So Julia, we hope you feel better soon. Okay, bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Ms. Cameron,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
It works out beautifully that you're early.
Okay.
Do you mind joining us now?
Love
Does this
to.
work? Okay, that's
Perfect.
great. And before we get started, could you see if Sure, that'd be great. Nice to see you. Yeah, I don't know if you've been in this year.
Do some other work.
Great, great. Well, it's great to have you here. And so our question is related to S-171, an act relating to legal residency of a student following displacement by natural disaster. Have you had an opportunity to look at the bill?
Yes.
Okay, so wondering if you want to comment, give us your thoughts.
Absolutely.
Thank you
And
so much.
Hi.
And do you know everybody around the, we'll just introduce ourselves starting soon.
Secretary Rose from Rutland District. Gabe Weeks, Rutland District.
I can't be in Bennington.
Hi, Martina Rock Ulick, Chittenden Central.
I'm not a machine with County.
I'm Sandra Cameron, an Associate Executive Director with the Vermont School Boards Association. So my role, can I talk a little bit about my role just to
Love it.
set the stage? So my role with the VSBA in more recent years has been around policy development, of governmental affairs, and more recently around district quality standards, diving into that work. But prior to coming to the VSBA, I was a school administrator. So
Where were you?
Gary
You
for
were
10
Gary,
years.
okay.
Yep, I was early ed director.
Great.
Big switch. So I come to the work with a little understanding of what this looks like in the field, but then also this policy lens. So thank you for having me and for inviting us to speak. The Vermont Superintendents Association also authorized me to speak on their behalf. So we've talked about
Terrific.
what my testimony says and what I want to express in their behalf. So Vermont school leaders are committed to student stabilization. Students who experience homelessness due to a natural disaster qualify under the McKinney-Vento Act with those protections and same timelines. While we know that the number of homeless students in Vermont more than doubled between 2017 and 2023, we don't have data on how many students would access additional provisions under the language in S-171. We are aware that the Agency of Education and Legislative Council have provided information about the definitions and the expansive federal provisions in the McKinney-Vento Act. We understand the committee is considering a statutory change in order to apply those protections or similar protections when students are displaced by a natural disaster and have secured fixed regular residence in another district. Under the McKinney-Vento Act, eligibility determinations follow the school year. So when students are have been determined eligible by the homeless liaison, which every district is required to have, all rights and services are provided to the student through the academic year, even if they secure permanent housing during that year. That's the stability piece that's really important in McKinney-Vento. As stated in the handout from the National Center for Homeless Education, which I included in my testimony, the Act provides stability and support for students by requiring public schools to enroll eligible children and youth immediately assess their needs, and provide or refer them to additional services as needed. Further, schools alone cannot meet the numerous and diverse needs of all students, and therefore effective liaisons establish collaborations, not only with other school districts, but also with other community agencies. The VSBA provides a model policy addressing students who are homeless, also in the written testimony. And adoption of that policy is required because of the federal requirements. So all school boards must adopt a policy addressing students who are homeless. The first sentence is, the school district is committed to the success of every student. The model policy has a language around the designated homeless liaison who carries out the duty as outlined in law. And McKinney-Vento has been around for quite some time, so there's quite a lot of guidance around that. This person communicates with the family about making decisions in the best interest of the student, which might be to stay in the school of origin, which is the school where the student was when they were last permanently housed, or it might be to transfer.
And this is a conversation between the family and the homeless liaison?
Yes.
Okay.
And each situation is unique. So
Sure.
that's a really critical component there. The policy also outlines the responsibilities of the administration to address all of the entitlements that come along with McKinney-Vento. So those are equal access to the same free appropriate public education, immediate enrollment and maintenance of educational stability, access to educational and related services for which they are eligible, which could include Title I, services for students with disabilities, educational programs for English learners, career and technical education, programs for gifted and talented students, full participation in school, which might include extracurricular activities, transportation, privacy, and dispute of eligibility, school selection, and enrollment decisions. So all of that has to be addressed by the administration. Given the broad, I think the AOE used the word expansive application and provisions of entitlements in the McKinney-Vento Act, there are many questions and concerns around S-171. The following questions come from VSBA members, as well as some of our colleagues at the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont Association of School Business Officers, and the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators. First question is, why do we need a state statute when we have a federal law that covers students displaced by disasters, has successfully been in existence since the 1980s, and has a lot of associated guidance and required reporting? The second question is, how would school personnel determine which law applies to which situation? What possible complications might there be between federal and state law? McKinney-Vento provides a safety net for the academic year, that's student stability piece, for any student experiencing homelessness. S-171 as introduced appears open-ended and may be challenging to operationalize. So the questions were, what if the family makes subsequent moves or moves out of state? What are the special considerations for students who need additional support or transportation? Are there equity concerns? And so that question is around, when I listened to some of the discussions so far, there was a conversation about whether or not transportation would be required. And if you're a family who doesn't need transportation, that won't be a barrier for you. But if you're a family who does, it would be a barrier.
Yeah.
So that's something definitely to think about. And then finally, unfunded mandate. So McKinney-Vento has a federal provision. There's a grant. The SBA is responsible for overseeing that. If it becomes a state provision, who oversees it? Where will the funding come from? Those are the complications that someone from BASBO could probably talk about a bit more.
Senator Lynch.
Did you say VSEA is responsible? For the funding?
The
Oversee.
SEA, so the state
Oh,
educational
okay.
agency, yes. So they have to oversee the LEAs, the local
Okay.
educational agencies, yes. Good clarification. And then what are the definitions for displacement and natural disaster? And so while we appreciate the intention of the bill, absent resolution of the issues and questions raised above, we urge you not to move forward with the legislation until such time that we can answer those questions. Students who are homeless, regardless of the cause of their homelessness, are protected under the federal McKinney-Vento Act. And when determined eligible, are protected for the rest of the year, the rest of the academic year. And then there's a new, at the end, so in my work, when I've done this in the
Yeah.
past, the next year you meet with the family again and you talk about how's the situation changed, where are you now? And you start over. School boards are required to adopt the policy ensuring these specific provisions, including the coordination of support through a designated homeless liaison, which is a critical position.
Great testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Incredibly helpful. One quick question that I have, homeless liaison. How long have we required homeless liaisons in the districts, you know?
It would be federal law. It's in federal law.
So this wasn't something that evolved out of ARPA funds or anything like
Right.
this. This is.
Oh, years and years.
Years and years.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's terrific. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions? So it seems to me that we'll hold off on this at this point. I will talk to Senator Ron Hinsdale, Bill, if you'd be willing to reach out to her by email.
Sure.
And just also say, just that you're available to answer questions. We're in the committee, and I think, you've raised some really great concerns, and some of which we've heard, but then I feel better knowing that, having heard from you, that I feel better that families are more confident families can take care of me.
Yeah, and if I could just share, in reaching out to some of our colleagues, we did
Yeah.
hear some superintendents say they specifically leaned on making Evento to support families this summer.
Yeah.
So, it gave them the avenue to do that. So
Yeah.
I want to reassure you that they are using this provision for situations like floods.
So along that line, just curiosity question, is there any information, any data on that, like, 100 families, anything like that?
One superintendent I spoke with said dozens. Yeah, I
One
would,
superintendent
Yeah.
does in that.
you probably
In a highly affected
Yeah,
area.
sure.
like what-
imagine
Yeah.
which district that was, right?
Yeah. Senator Williams?
And I think I heard you say that there were some questions there that you'd have to get answered,
These questions, yes.
so.
Yeah, if we were to move forward next year or something with this, we would have to really dig in, but
So in
I'm
the
not-
meantime,
I think we're okay. I think we're okay with the federal policy. Senator Dewitt?
I was just gonna say, I did pull up the homeless, students who are homeless model policy, and I thought we could post it on our webpage so everyone.
Oh, that would be really helpful.
It's in my testimony as well.
Oh, it's in your.
Did you send your testimony to Dr. Feldman?
Mine.
Okay. Do we have it?
Wait, I'm sorry.
It was online. It was online.
Oh, yeah. If you don't mind printing it
Yeah.
out, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll talk to Senator Ron Hinsdale and, let her know. The good news, really, is they're covered and
It's really nice
it's really, yeah.
that the feds, every once in a while, the feds come through with some good stuff. This is an issue that we have often
other than,
in our various committees.
Yeah.
other than some of the requirements that affect what we do.
Yeah,
Sure.
but the number of homeless kids in the state is astounding.
Yeah, would you say double in 3 years?
Yeah, well, I think it's 6 years, 17 to 23, wasn't it?
Oh, is that what you said? Yeah, you're right.
There's a
report we just got in our email. These statistics.
Yeah,
So it's like 480 something,
oh, yeah, it was over 400. Yeah.
was a couple years ago, 200 something.
So we have two more scheduled bits of testimony. We have Eric Fitzpatrick, who's coming at 2:40, so you've got about 15 minutes. And Eric is going to take us through the Vermont Public Library section having to do with firearm regulations. Eric's attorney's been around here for a long time, judiciary. And then after that, we'll hear from Scott Giles. I have some list of decision points we have to make around libraries, so we'll go through that. And then I think most of us, if not all, are heading to superintendent's meetings, 4:30, right? 4:30.
Yeah, and there is dinner, you're right. Yeah,
Okay. 4:30 to 6:30?
6.
So it's okay. I know some people can't get there at 5:30.
That's
Can't
not
get there
worth
at
it, yeah.
5:30, yeah. Show up in food. Right.
Can we make library decisions now, or we've got this 15 minutes, or do we have to wait?
We're gonna
till
have
after
another
the gun?
15 minutes actually after guns.
Okay.
Scott, so.
Alright.